Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Windpower Engineering and Development webinar entitled Windpower Operations and NERC Compliance. This webinar is sponsored by DNB KEMA. I'm your host, Nick Sharpley, Managing Editor of Windpower Engineering and Development magazine. Thank you for joining us. Just a brief agenda before we start. This webinar is being recorded and will be available at windpowerengineering.com. A link to it and the slides will be emailed to everyone. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. Of course, not everyone that wanted to watch today's webinar could do so, but you can help them learn from it by tweeting key points and the takeaways you think are important. In your tweets, be sure to include the hashtag WinWebinar. Also, after the presentation, I'll read the questions that you in the audience have submitted. You can do that by typing them into the questions box on your GoToMeeting panel that should be on the right of your screen. We'll try to answer as many as possible before the hour is up. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about our speaker, and I'll turn the microphone over. Raymond Gilby is a member of DNB KEMA's NERC compliance group and has over 35 years of utility experience. Since 2007, Ray has been assisting generation and transmission entities with NERC registration, operating in cybersecurity processes and procedures for NERC compliance, defining and implementing NERC compliance programs, serving as interim or startup NERC compliance manager to bridge the resource gap, and performing initial annual and dry run compliance assessments. With that, let's start. Ray, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, I've been with KEMA for 15 years. At KEMA, I've been involved with NERC compliance, and prior to that, transitioned to ISO mode of operation. I spent 3.5 years with BES. Prior to that, 9.5 years with Macro Corporation prior to its purchase by KEMA. And I spent 14.5 years at Leeds and Northrop developing SCADA, distributed control systems, and EMS systems. A little bit about DNB KEMA. Who are we? My takeaway from this slide is we are a large company, 10,000 employees plus. We're in a lot of countries, 100. We provide a lot of services, and we've been doing it longer than I can remember, 150 years. Sorry for the eye chart, but that's what we use to highlight. In this presentation, we're going to concentrate on common NERC compliance issues I see in the wind power industry. I will cover initial NERC-related due diligence required prior to construction and synchronization, the confusion over the definition of generator operator, communication requirements that are a challenge to the average wind power resource, emergency operations as they pertain to renewables, the ever-popular cybersecurity for today and tomorrow, and I want to touch on the redefinition of the bulk electric system and what we need to monitor as an industry. I'm not planning to cover the basic NERC compliance concepts. One can learn from NERC.com. For more information, you can attend the next NERC Standards and Compliance 101 webinar on September the 24th, 10 to noon Eastern Time. You can find that on their website. Talking about NERC-related due diligence prior to construction, documents and information are created prior to construction that are required as evidence during the operating life of the facility. This evidence includes such things as modeling data, and VAR control agreements with the transmission operator. In the wind power industry, there is often a disconnect between the entities that are involved with the construction and those that operate the facility, making it difficult to obtain such things as the feasibility study information after the startup firms depart and the operating entity takes over. This evidence serves as objective evidence of compliance for years into the future. Moving on to NERC-related due diligence prior to synchronization to the grid, the procedures used by the entity that performed the initial protection system testing are required for compliance evidence. These procedures are the ones used to test protection system components, including relay schemes, relay settings, DC circuitry, batteries, and associated communications if present. The test results are also required as evidence of compliance. Also, for the protection systems, evidence that design and implementation were coordinated with others is also required. The static and dynamics data created for the feasibility studies are needed as evidence of compliance, as well as for periodic network modeling performed by others. This evidence created during the startup, commissioning, justification has invariably been missing in projects that I've assisted with and required significant work to capture after the fact. Another due diligence item is to create a robust NERC compliance program using FERC's and the regional entities guidelines. This is not a compliance issue, but may provide mitigation of fines imposed by NERC for non-compliance issues. I have witnessed this firsthand. Now you're ready at the point to submit your NERC registration form to the regional entity. This is a simple process involving providing such things as contact information and which registrations apply, such as generator operator and generator owner. If tasks such as the above are completed and evidence of compliance related to those activities are retained, the registered entity can now respond to auditor's request for evidence as of the synchronization and registration dates. The time duration between the registration and synchronization can vary based on the regional entity, but they should be as close to each other as possible. Premature registration can create issues at the time of the first audit, which should occur sometime within the first 6 years after registration. Moving on to the generator operator functionality, facility operation and maintenance are staff associated with the operation and maintenance of the wind farm. A NERC generator operator is that entity that serves as the interface between the balancing authority and the generator O&M. The NERC acronym for this entity is GOP. I am going to use the acronym GOP to refer to the NERC function due to the confusion the word operator creates. The entity performing the GOP function can be a third party, especially in renewable power industry. If a third party performing some or all of the GOP functions is not compliant with the NERC GOP requirements, the entity registered as the GOP is 100% liable for NERC penalties unless the contract with a third party covers payment of such fines. Regardless who pays the fines, the registered entity is the only entity publicized with the non-compliance and the fine. To NERC, any third-party agreement is the responsibility of the registered GOP, and every registered generator owner must have an assigned and registered GOP. If no third party has agreed to be the GOP, the default GOP goes to the GO, the generation owner. As a general rule, wind power entities register as the GO and GOP. communication requirements associated with being a GOP. Per NERC, each GOP shall have interpersonal communication capability with its balancing authority and its transmission operator, and shall have evidence, which could include, but is not limited to, physical assets, dated evidence such as equipment specifications and installation documentation, test records, operator logs, voice recordings, transcripts of voice recordings, or electronic communications. As stated earlier, if a third party is involved with such communication, the registered GOP is responsible for the evidence just listed previously. The next logical step is for the GOP with communications to prepare for emergency operations. Per NERC, a GOP shall have voice and data link communications with the reliability coordinator, the balancing authority, and the transmission operator that are staffed and available for addressing a real-time emergency condition. As an example is a reliability directive that involves the operation of all generating resources to maximize output and availability during an emergency. That requires that any and all staff or contractors that have control over the state of the turbines be aware that no turbines can be taken offline or have their output decreased during the emergency unless it's to protect equipment or life. Violating a reliability directive can be severe, especially if it is determined to have contributed to a blackout or extending the duration of a blackout. Communication procedures, training, testing, and 24/7 communications are required for every GOP, regardless of the type of fuel it uses. Now I'm going to deviate from the operations and touch on cybersecurity, something that is very in our face based on where Congress is at right now. Wind power facilities are generally limited to 5 cybersecurity requirements under version 3. Under version 4, large GOP operations may be required to meet all 42 requirements, which have an October 2014 enforcement date. Version 5 of the cyber standards may well eclipse version 4, and under this version, all GOP may well be subject to many cybersecurity requirements. The enforcement date for version 5 is currently under discussion and needs to be watched by all GOP entities since it's FERC's desire to go version 5 with a short as possible implementation period. If you didn't already know, there is a change on the horizon that will impact many renewables that are currently connected to the grid at greater than 100 kV and less than 200 kV, with greater than 75 MVA capacity. Under phase 1 of the new bulk electric system definition, these facilities become part of the bulk electric system and additional NERC compliance requirements effective July 1st, 2014. Phase 2 may well extend the bulk electric system into the wind farms when they have collectors with high side windings greater than 100 kV, among other things yet being decided. That is currently in the ballot process as we speak at NERC. It has been my intention to leave you with some high-level knowledge of what is required to not only be a good steward of the grid's reliability, but also to be audit-ready when required in areas I find problematic for the wind industry clients. One area requires that wind farm planners and builders know what evidence of compliance is required by the operators. Another is the need to have a well-defined GOP functionality with the required communications to ensure that GOP is on top of reliability directives. The emphasis for any independent power producer is financial, but in the NERC world, reliability trumps the market. As we know, in order for wind power to become a dominant source of electricity, we not only need to continue the improvement in production, we need to be self-sufficient. That includes providing dispatch, voltage, VAR, and regulation services at the command of the balancing authority and transmission operator. While working to that end, we also need to be good stewards of the reliability of the grid. Here are a few conferences and workshops you can meet DNV KEMA. I personally will be at the NERC Standard and Compliance Workshop September 24th through the 26th. If you're there, look me up. I love to talk compliance and associated due diligence. Okay, Nick, you want to take over?
All right, thanks, Ray. And thank you for that information. I'm sure our audience found that useful. So we're just going to wrap up here with a few questions from the audience. Okay, it looks like our first question is, what options do we have if we don't have the pre-synchronization evidence we need?
Well, that's the common problem I run into because those entities are gone. The first place would be to go to those entities and get their paperwork, the evidence that certain things were done with respect to the interconnection agreement, procuring modeling data, the people that performed the testing of the protection system, and the results of that, the procedures they used to do those tests and the results they obtained as a result of that test. That will be needed long into the future. Some of this evidence may be procured by going to the transmission operator, who was generally a participant in the interconnection agreements and such. They may have some of the paperwork that you may or may not have been able to retain. But and usually going to a third-party tester that did the protection system maintenance is usually not that difficult. But those are the sort of things you need to get in your hand to have evidence that it was performed and performed successfully.
Okay, thanks, Ray. The next question is, are GOPs required or advised to provide corrosion management plans as part of their application for NERC certification?
Not that I know of. You said corrosion, right?
Yes, it says advised to provide corrosion management plans as part of their application. No.
I have not. I've submitted a number of applications. There's 8 regional entities that all have their own application, and I have not seen anything like that on any of the NERC applications. If there is, I would like to know which one it is. But the applications that I'm familiar with purely ask for contact information for the authorized entity officer, the primary compliance contact, secondary compliance contact, and what entities they're registering for. In case of a wind power, it'd be primarily GO and GOP.
Okay.
So my answer is I don't know of any.
Okay, thank you. The third question we have is, what if we don't have the ability to receive directives 24/7?
As a GOP, that is an absolute requirement. I understand that not all facilities have 24/7 operations, but we've implemented such things as hot potato phones or a mobile red line hotline phone where someone is always has it in their possession and has a cell signal. But that isn't, to miss a reliability directive and to do the wrong thing and then have something go wrong on the grid are ramifications nobody wants to deal with.
Okay, thank you. Another question, what are the primary compliance differences or obligations between the GO and the GOP entities?
Okay. The GO is the generation owner, and they're responsible for the facility itself, protection systems, voltage control, bar control, very basic. The GOP, again, is that interface between the GO and the balancing authority. So they're basically the pass-through. They're the ones that are in traditional utilities, are the operators in the control room. They aren't necessarily at the site, unlike a wind farm might be. But their evidence is evidence that such things as, I'll go back to the reliability directive. If a reliability directive is issued, they're the ones that have to log when it was issued. They're the ones that have to log when the what was accomplished. If it couldn't be accomplished, when was the balancing authority or transmission operator or reliability coordinator informed of the status of it, and have that all logged down because that's evidence that due diligence was performed. So their evidence is pretty much the evidence of exchange of information between the boots on the ground and the entities to which the wind farm is entering to, such as reliability coordinator, transmission operator, and the balancing authority. It's a very clear line of distinction in the NERC world. That's why the word operations ends up being confusing to most of us in the wind industry, because to us operations are the boots on the ground. To NERC, operations is that entity that's being talked to by, that's being called by the balancing authority, or that is submitting information to the balancing authority regarding schedules and whatnot. So it's very distinct and unique requirements between the two, and very rarely do they ever overlap.
Okay. Can you tell us the time during which a directive needs to be fulfilled?
In most cases, you have to determine within 30 minutes of whether or not you can or can't do it. If you are able to perform a reliability directive, the entity that's issuing the directive needs to know within 30 minutes that you can't do it and that they have to go to some other alternative means. Most of these reliability directives are area-wide, and in some cases, if a wind farm happens to miss it, it may or may not be noticed, or renewable miss it, but if something goes wrong, an investigation will find that. So it's, again, it's important that 24/7 contact be available to the balancing authority, reliability coordinator, and transmission operator in such a case, so that their infractions, non-compliance won't occur.
Okay. Can you tell us what the timeline is or how long it takes for the certification process?
There technically isn't a certification process, unlike other such as OSHA and OET, the environmental and whatnot. I like to use the saying in NERC, you're only compliant the second a auditor says you're compliant. 1 second after that, you're no longer considered compliant, because your compliance only occurs as a result of doing everything right and not doing anything wrong, which is minute by minute. If instead you're asking about registration, that's simply a case of filling out an online form and hitting submit, and waiting for them to come back and say you are now a registered entity and here's your NERC ID. There's no evidence submitted to do that. It's just submitting the form with the information I discussed before. So registration can take anywhere from 1 week to several months depending on the region and what they're busy doing right that point in time. So I've had clients that waited 2 or 3 months to be registered, and I've had other clients that were registered within a week of their submitting their form, or a form that changed their registration, whatever the case may be. So registration is just that piece of paper online form. Certification isn't a term that we use in the NERC world.
Okay. What is the difference between dispatch, set point, and directive?
Dispatch is something that is issued as part of an ongoing balancing. A directive is, when we say a directive, we're talking reliability directive. Both of them could be called a directive, but when we talk a reliability directive, we're talking about something that generally starts at the top, reliability coordinator, and works its way down. But it's an emergency. Something is about to go wrong or may go wrong, and they need to have generators and or loads make corrections, be prepared, be on the lookout, whatever the case may be, so that in the event it does happen, or in the event that it is happening, that it can avert a blackout, a voltage collapse, whatever the case may be. A directive is a dispatch is something that a large utility would be receiving through their EMS system. It's electronic back and forth. A fixed unit may receive it via a phone call or some electronic, and that's just normal hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute, operation, whereas a directive is something that happens very rarely and is generally only related to an emergency.
Okay. Another question is, do you know the current rate of growth for wind farms in the U.S.?
At the WEA conference, I heard what it was, and it was significant. It slowed down this last year. The year before last, I guess it was really robust. The numbers I do not have at hand. That was not one question I was anticipating. WEA was estimating that next year it may be even slower than this year. Always because of our Congress is not willing to commit long-term. They keep us hanging on the precipice until December to let us know whether or not our tax benefits are going to arrive. But it appears to be slowing down, but it doesn't appear to be stopping.
Okay. And one last question here. Does a wind farm maximize output during an emergency? Or how does a wind farm maximize output during an emergency?
Good question. The directive, the reliability directive that goes out to all IPPs, there's a requirement by the transmission operator that when they declare an emergency, they must tell all IPPs and renewables maximize output and maintain output. Of course, you cannot increase the wind. In some cases, something may be in maintenance that can be brought back online without any harm. But the important one is that you don't minimize. So to maximize, you bring something on that was off that you can use to help the region or the area. But the problematic area ends up being when someone in another state, another country is doing tweaking or making changes to the turbines as part of their normal O&M and did not get the word that an emergency has, a directive has been declared, and therefore if something goes wrong and the investigation will ensue, the investigation will find that what each IPP did during the outage, and if an IPP's outputs dropped, they will investigate. Now with the wind farm, it's, well, gee, the wind stopped blowing, but having an investigation finding that someone actually decreased the, or turned off a turbine or turned off a string, the FERC will be in your sandbox for quite a while, and you don't want that. So the easiest thing to do is to ensure you have the communications. First of all, that you've received the directive, and second of all, that you've passed it to all parties involved with the operation and control of the facility.
Okay, thanks, Ray. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of time. Once again, this webcast is available, will be available for reviewing at windpowerengineering.com. One final message is you can follow Windpower Engineering on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. This concludes our presentation, and I'd like to thank everyone for their attention. Enjoy the rest of your day.